Why do you believe that Kevin's responsible for Rachelle's murder?
My dad's never raised his voice, raised a hand to me. I was never smacked as a child. I experienced nothing but displays of love. But I know when I disappointed my dad and I saw evil sides of him, I saw how calculated and sinister he could be. I could see the way he treated women. I knew he was capable of horrible things. I knew that crossing him could be dangerous for people, but I know how quickly he can turn on his most significant relationships, how you can go from being the centre of his universe to nothing and no one very easily. But I think my initial instinct when hearing that Rachelle had been murdered was that it was my father.
I'm Ashlea Hansen, and you're listening to episode 14 of Dear Rachelle, a podcast by True Crime Australia. This is the untold story of Rachelle Childs, a 23-year-old who was brutally murdered. Her killer has never been caught. This is the second of a two-part interview with Steven Corell's daughter, Jazz. As you heard last episode, Jazz has some pretty strong beliefs about her father, particularly in relation to historic allegations for which she was found not guilty. Jazz also believes her dad murdered Rachelle. These are only Jazz's opinions about her dad. She's come to these views through a combination of her own interactions with her father and witnessing his relationships with other people, including both of his ex-wives, the first being her mother. This, of course, doesn't make it proof of Kevin's guilt of any offences. These are only Jazz's opinions. And in fact, you will hear Jazz say she doesn't have any evidence that her dad committed these crimes. But we think it's important for you to hear her voice. Steven Corell strenuously denies any involvement in Rachelle's murder and has never been charged. He has willingly participated in 3 records of interview with police and provided his DNA to investigators. A coroner presiding over Rachelle's inquest made an open finding. Did you ever meet Rachelle?
Yes, I did, at Campton Holden. Being that I think I met her when I was about 16. I was 17 when she passed. So my brother had not long had his licence and he often borrowed cars from Campton Holden. And so, you know, if he was heading out there to visit our dad, I'd often go, and I met Rachelle a few times, and at that age, you know, a young woman that age, it's automatically someone you look up to, and, you know, she's very bubbly and friendly and, yeah, just lovely. Very, very sweet.
Do you remember being told that she died?
I don't remember the specifics on how I found that out. I don't remember a conversation with my dad about it. My feeling is possibly that my brother told me, but I can't confirm that. My brother at that time had a closer relationship with my dad. At 16, 17, I didn't really have a lot to do with him. Between the time she passed away and the time I fell pregnant with my elder son, I had cut my dad from my life and told him I believed he did it. So this was before the inquest. But I had stated that I believed he was responsible. And it wasn't until later in my pregnancy that I reconnected with him, and I think I apologised for saying that. Put it down to being angry at him. As I said, you know, being 17, I don't remember the order in which I found things out, but I think there was possibly a conversation about, you know, the defrauding of Campton Holden. And I was well aware that if Rachelle had become aware that he was doing that, and, you know, if someone told me my dad stole something, I would immediately believe that my dad is a thief. Most of the time he passes it off as a joke. We couldn't go anywhere without him pocketing something or, and it was always a joke to him. I think he really got off on doing things like that, insignificant things. I remember one time from a shopping centre, he stole bins so he could have them out the back. They were nice, decorative bins. He'd brag about it.
When did you start to think that the fraud allegations against your father could have been his motive?
I think it was... He definitely didn't tell me, because I remember bringing it up to him about Camden Holden. I think I'd read it in a paper. And I asked him, I said, what's this about, you defrauding? And he said, I remember something about $7,000. And he said, I'm going to kill a young girl over $7,000. And he denied that he had defrauded Holden. It's possibly that my brain's been attached to that for 24 years, that the sexual element of it was something I had not considered, which is probably ridiculous to most considering his history. I didn't view it that way though. So yeah, to me it was about her exposing who he was. I think she possibly started questioning things because of her commissions, which made him paranoid. Probably didn't know how to get out of it. He felt like he was being exposed. Exposing my dad in any way, exposing or shining a light on him not being wonderful is what will set him off. I don't think he can bring anybody in. I don't think it would have occurred to him to say to Rachelle, I'll give you some extra money, if she found out about the fraud. I think a lot of the time when my dad's been in a situation where he's being exposed, he just moves on to the next part of his life. I don't know what it was about Rachelle. I think maybe being in a car yard too, like that. My dad worked in car yards my whole life. That becoming well known, it would have angered him. I remember there was one podcast where one of my dad's former partners said that my dad spoke about Rachelle's performance dropping in the months before she died. For him to speak about someone like that, my dad wouldn't care if someone wasn't working hard. It's not something that would affect him. He wasn't a hard worker, he never has been. His views of her had shifted, and he was probably trying to make Rachelle look a certain way so that if she did expose him, or it could be that she had laughed at him, changed his view entirely. But also he would have been trying to change people's perceptions of Rachelle, to make her look like a liar if she came out and exposed him.
What about if she'd rejected him?
Probably the most dangerous thing that she could have done. I don't think my dad gets rejected very often. I think, in most social settings where, maybe he'd make an advance, he'd probably never see that woman again if she, was at mingles and that's fine, and he'd probably accept that and minimise how much he wanted her. But with Rachelle being in his life every day and how much he would have been infatuated with her, her rejecting him would have been a massive hit to his ego. But if Rachelle had rejected him or mocked him, or if it was known that she had rejected him, that would have infuriated him. Because the biggest thing for my dad is the show, the ego, the being revered by people. He needs to be centre stage. He needs to be the most important person. It would have embarrassed him. And that's probably the most dangerous thing you can do to my dad, is embarrass him.
You've had a lot of years to consider your father's behaviour, what you know of him, and also now insights into Rachelle's case. What do you believe happened to Rachelle that night?
I believe that he lured her with the Walkinshaw. He convinced her they were going to pick it up. I don't know how he convinced her to drive her car. I think he met her at Bargo. That's the only part that's missing for me, why they went in her car. My dad's known to always be the driver. I've never driven with my dad in the car. Don't know how that happened. I think he then, they went to Giroa. I think he wanted to kill her possibly as punishment for rejecting him, but I think it was about the exposure of him defrauding Camden Holden. I think he pulled up at that exact spot for the cement pit, and when couldn't get that open, he's left her where he has. And I think maybe there was a car near Bargo Pub. He's driven back there. I believe the reason her radio was stolen is my dad's terrified of technology. He doesn't understand it. When my dad doesn't understand things, he's angry about them. And it's something we've sort of been able to mock him about, technology, which insults him. It affects his ego. I think around that time would have been when you'd first sort of see on crime shows that radios had GPS features. And because my dad didn't understand, I think it was important to him that he take that out. First thing, when I heard about the radio, which was only in the last few weeks, my first thought was he took it out because technology. There was also comments about, the 3 different places he had a shoe, handbags, and the sheet, was it? I think he would have been insulted with the way that was presented as him being fearful and anxious and disorganised. I think he did that intentionally, and he thought it was forensically intelligent. He wouldn't like how it was interpreted as he didn't do a good job. And he'd probably be smug in the fact that, well, if it was so bad, why have I got away with it? My dad thinks he knows the legal system, and he doesn't. A few times I've had to explain things, and, he doesn't like that at all. He's never had any regard whatsoever for my intelligence, and despite my degree, I could fill him in and he just get frustrated. He thinks he knows everything about it because of watching SVU and all those shows. But I think he thinks of himself as someone who, rather than luck, it's because of his skill, he's got away with things. I think that's how he views it.
Your father must be afforded the presumption of innocence. But why do you believe he's gotten away with Rachelle's murder?
I honestly couldn't tell you. I think my dad's probably the luckiest man I've ever known, and I've always seen luck on his side. I remember my mum was definitely never someone who, even though she had valid reason to say a lot of things about my father, she wasn't one of those mothers who ever badmouthed us. She'd stop my grandparents from ever saying anything bad as well, but she used to always say, your father will always land on his feet. I heard that a billion times through my life. And he does. If we did a raffle somewhere, my dad would win. My dad always got the best parking spot. I've seen him just have this extraordinary luck. Didn't happen once or twice, repeatedly, all the time. I've never known anyone with this luck, and I'm sort of the opposite. I have the opposite luck. I get every light. My dad never gets them. I think his luck is just, it's something else. I don't know where it comes from. I think, when you look at his cases from the 80s, you can point to the times. Victims weren't believed. My dad is very charismatic, very charming, and he can convince people of many different things. He just packs up and then he lands on his feet again every time. And I think because he's got away with so many things, he does feel untouchable and invincible. I've never seen my dad anxious or scared of anything. He has a very, very low range of emotions. There's anger, which he suppresses, but I can see it in his eyes. I know when my dad's angry, but he doesn't show it. And there's happy, fun, that version of my dad. And that's most of the time. Yeah, but there's not a wide range. And he just, he's used that to win people over and have people defend him. There were quite a few years that I know I protected him, where people would have their doubts and I would convince them that, I wouldn't have someone like that in my life. I'll always feel guilt and shame about that because deep down I knew, but I needed other people to not believe that. My dad was a big support of mine. That sounds disgraceful, I know, that, I was willing to let something like murder slide for the support he offered. But there was a lot of trauma in my life. I was not well. And I didn't know how to deal with all of this.
Do you remember realising he was being investigated over Rachelle's murder?
I remember my mum's parents had told me they rang the police to tell them about my dad's real name with his former history. And I remember the police coming out to interview me. I don't remember a lot of questions. I just remember them asking about a sheet more than anything. I can't remember exactly what I said to them at the time, but they were asking me if had been to his place at Lake Illawarra. And yeah, I'd been there maybe once or twice. So I couldn't give them a lot of information. But I just knew, I don't know, I always had that feeling, but I think the minute I knew was when the inquest was happening and it was printed about Rachelle's fingers. And my dad was coming over daily at that time and he was falling apart about what they were printing about him. And at that time it was horrible, I lost a lot of friends through that time with no notice or anything. But I remember him coming over and I had read about Rachelle being exhumed. And Dad walked into my house and he said, "They're saying I've made up this comment about the fingers. I've never said that." But I knew at that moment that he'd done it because he told me the story multiple times. He had said that Rachelle's fingers were cut off because she was dealing drugs for bikers. And that's a biker punishment. He had a fascination with bikers. But the second he told me that was a lie and he never said those things, that's when I realised he's done this. That was the moment. And I remember talking to my eldest son when there was a lot of stuff in the media. And I mean, my baby boy was maybe 12. And he wanted to know about the case. He knew that, his grandfather had been in the media and stuff. It was way too young to have those conversations, but I was worried about what would be said in the schoolyard and, his friends' parents having conversations with friends and stuff. So I had to tell him about the case and it's burnt into my eyelids the minute I told him about the fingers. And the pain in my son's face realising who his grandfather was. I've never, ever forgotten that conversation. I don't remember how we sat down and talked. I know I would have been gentle, but the second I said about the fingers, his face, never forget it.
And for you, it was this conversation sitting on the couch when he said,
"I never said that.
I never said that." What was that like for you in that moment? Take me into that room.
I just wanted to pass out. I still remember just feeling electrified.
Were you fearful?
At that time, I didn't think my dad would hurt me. There have been many periods through my life where I did believe my dad would hurt me if he could get away with it. But at that time, I think he was very dependent on people thinking he's innocent, and he viewed me as someone who believed he was innocent. But I was scared of what he was capable of. I was definitely scared to say, "You're lying." I would never have said that because that would have put me in danger.
It must have taken a lot of guts for you to accuse your father of Rachelle's murder.
Throughout, I mean, there's probably been 4 or 5 big blow-ups between me and my dad where we get to that level of cruelty. First time was when I was 12, and then that second time after Rachelle died. And it's built up. It's all the times where I played along and got resentful or let it go that he was flat out lying. And it builds up and builds up to a point where I just snap. We never discuss it when we come back together. There's been brief mentions, and my dad would never take accountability for any of it. He'd talk about how much I hurt him.
How soon after Rachelle's murder did your father tell you that Rachelle's fingers had been cut off?
I don't remember the specific conversation. I remember telling people, because that's what my dad had told me, that bikers had done it. And I remember just feeling like the blood had drained from my face the time he sat on my lounge and said, "I've never said that." He'd said it to me multiple times. I don't remember him talking about Rachelle's death in any other sense than him defending himself. There was no conversations about missing Rachelle or how wonderful she was, or there was never anything other than bikers did it. She was dealing drugs, and it was that he wasn't involved.
What did he say when you said, "I believe you did it"?
My dad will match my cruelty. When I'm a pretty passive person. As I said, I'm very compliant with my dad's lies and things like that. And then I let it all build up until I erupt, and I get very cruel. And I have said some really cruel things to my dad. My dad matches that, and he says crueler things back. And I mean, there's been times throughout my life that I've had doubts and thought, what if he didn't do it? And I've said the most horrific thing. It would be heartbreaking to have your child throw that in your face. But I do believe he did it. I think he knows he did it.
Did he ever have any compassion or grief about what happened to Rachelle?
Not that I ever saw. I don't think I've ever seen compassion in my father, except when my daughter died. I know that broke him. I think that was the single most painful thing of his life. His cruelty was always in a very, very different way than most people experience cruelty. He managed to get people in on it with him always. And I think that's so unique, and it adds an extra layer of evilness. I think he fully thought that his charm would make people not suspect him. And he could point it towards bikers because in his eyes, he would have lost any adoration he had for Rachelle because she was hanging out with bikers. He has a very skewed view on how women are supposed to act. He would have minimised Rachelle's worth in hearing that she was hanging out with bikers. I know that he would have had an infatuation with her, and it would have seriously angered him that she was involved with people like that, because he expects to be revered. He expects to be the centre of everyone's attention.
Do you believe that your father cut off Rachelle's fingers?
Yes, I do. I think that was his attempt at getting away with it. As I've said, he's very calculated. He thinks he is forensically super intelligent. And I think he intentionally cut off her fingers and make up the rumour that Rachelle was dealing drugs for bikers, because that's something he could completely dismiss her character. He would, minimise her character. Whether Rachelle was doing that or not, and I don't believe for a second she was, that's not something I would say, well, you deserve to be killed for. In my dad's head, she would become nothing and no one if she's dealing with bikers, if she's dealing drugs. He would have been able to minimise in his head who she was as a human being. And although I can't visualise in my head that my dad would be able to burn a body, cut fingers off, it is the most horrific thing, thinking about him visually doing those things. I know how he can completely destroy any idea of someone's humanness when they have disappointed him.
Is that because you believe you've felt that and you've experienced that feeling of nothing?
He would act like I hung the moon and I was everything. And then I was nothing. And I was so insignificant, and he never cared. And he didn't care what happened to me.
What would be happening to him inside in those moments when he has rage for someone?
You'd see flickers in his face, especially his eyes. A lot of his victims have talked about his eyes. They're definitely really significant. I could see it, but I don't think anyone who didn't know him well would be able to see it. My dad's not reactive at all. He's not anxious. He's not full of, well, he probably is full of rage, but not in the sense that most people would have. He's very calculated. He can mask so much of what he's feeling and put a smile on his face and stew on it and come up with a plan and execute his revenge or his plan later on without anyone. It's very hard to say how you get victimised by my father, because there's a lot of gaslighting there, and most people would be like, what are you talking about? You sound crazy. You're paranoid. He's wonderful, and how does X, Y, and Z equal this? But it is. The people I'd see him, like when my dad didn't like someone, he would make jokes at their expense that everyone would laugh at, including myself. And I feel very guilty about that now. But to most people, go, it's banter, it's harmless, but it was cruel. It was always a cruelty, and he got off on making people laugh at people he didn't like.
What would you say to people, or even if your father said, she's lying, she has a grudge against me?
I think he said that to multiple people over the years. He has told, I know he's spoken to one of my sons who only very recently told me that this conversation had happened. But yeah, apparently my dad had said to him, I know your mum thinks I killed Rachelle. And they had a conversation about it. And, he said that, it was bikers that were responsible. And he said, your mum believes this because of a rape case back in the 80s. And then he told the police officer's daughter's story, which are conversations that I hadn't had with my son. So when he reported them all back to me only recently, he would have been about 13 or 14 at the time of this conversation. So yeah, he'd got into his head about it and tried to plant seeds of doubt there.
Why is it that you carry that shame and guilt about loving your father?
I think the way my dad is with me made people believe that he's not capable of bad things. I know with myself, when you meet a man who's a wonderful father, you believe in his inherent goodness. And I do believe, to a degree, I was a tool he used to convince people of that. And I played along. If there was an audience, my dad would really amp it up. He was very much the showman. If we were at a party, he would spin me around and dance with me and pretend I was the centre of everything. And I saw women fall over themselves with that act. He never told me how to do it, but I played into it because his love felt special. But when there wasn't an audience witnessing that, that didn't exist. I realised very early that I was a tool. I was something he used to convince people of his goodness, but I didn't want it to stop. There was very different versions of him. If he'd gone to jail, maybe I would never know him. Maybe he'd just be a story to me. Maybe I wouldn't have developed any love for him. It's a sacrifice I would have made, though, to not have my father in my life if he had gone to jail back in those times and there was potential for him to change. He couldn't undo what he'd done.
Do you hope for a day that this will stop following you?
Yeah. I mean, it feels selfish to ever put any focus on that I want this to stop following us. Not at the expense of Kristy and Anne receiving justice. I will endure this for the rest of my life if it means they get justice and they get the answers that they deserve. I don't want him found guilty and put in jail. I want him to admit what he did. I'll take it anyway. It happens. But I think they deserve that from him. I don't know if it's ever going to happen. I've told him when I'm in my cruel state of mind that he helps me get to, that, a lot of the time I think I wanted him in my life because I wanted a deathbed confession from him one day. I wanted something I could take to them. I remember, multiple times he's been unwell and, I don't know how true it is and stuff, but I wonder if he'll say anything. I don't think he will. I think he's too selfish for that. But I know that the day I find out my father has passed, the first thing I'm going to do before I shed a single tear will be to tell Kristy and Anne and anyone else that I know that's been victimised by him. And give them peace they deserve.
What do you want Kristy and Anne to know?
And I'm sorry. And I'm sorry that I participated in 24 years of him having good memories and happy days.
Jazz, you were a child when this happened and has nothing to do with you. This is heartbreaking to listen to you talk like this. That you hold so much guilt over somebody else's actions.
I don't know what they experience. I can't even comprehend, but I've lost a child. And it's the most excruciating pain in the world, and it never leaves. But to add on to that someone has walked free for 24 years, having good memories, and I've participated in that. I've told my dad I don't believe in karma, but I remember feeling like I lost my daughter as karma for standing by him. I did. It felt like the fact that I had a knowledge deep inside me that he did this and I still allowed him in my life. I don't even believe in the concept of it, but I feel like I need to be punished for that. I feel like I was complicit in what he's done and the people he's hurt. I wish he'd been caught 24 years ago and he was nothing but a story my children knew today. It's, I don't want the attention of this. I don't want to be going through any of this, but it needs to happen. And if justice is never served, I think it's important that his face is known, his name is known. He still has, his innocence and stuff, but I think it's significant that I'm his daughter and I don't believe in his innocence. And I could certainly get attention by saying he's innocent and being loud and proud about that and giving interviews and supporting him. That's not what this is about. I hate even the insinuation of that.
That would be a lot easier to do, but you've taken a harder step.
Yes.
To speak out about someone who you love.
Yep.
Deep down.
Yep. And it hurts. It hurts a lot to openly declare this. I'm sick constantly. This has been a lot. My kids have seen me in a horrific state over recent weeks. But it needs to happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a lot, but it feels good to get it out.
Coming soon on Dear Rachelle.
I've been working with Telstra, with Optus, with Vodafone. I have a good understanding of how the networks operate.
It's 2:20 a.m. It's the same time, and it just feels like the loneliest place in the world, doesn't it?
The killer knows this area well.
That person has taken so much from us.
Do you believe the modern technology that you have access to could help to solve Rachelle's case?
I think it can drive us forwards.
It breaks my heart yet again to have your life shared with such a massive worldwide audience.
Are you saying that Rachelle's case may not have been solved because of misogyny?
Yes, in simple terms, male ego.
Our conclusion is that alibi that he could have been in Campbelltown is just impossible. It just could not happen. It's rare that I'll say it's just impossible, but it's just impossible.
Dear Rachelle is a multimedia production from True Crime Australia. If you want to be one of the first to find out what happens next, go to dearrachelle.com.au. That's where eligible digital News Corp Australia subscribers get early access to podcast episodes and breaking news in our live investigation. And you will also find exclusive videos, interactive evidence, feature articles and more. That's dearrachelle.com.au. If you have any tips or confidential information to share with me, Ashlea Hansen, please send an email to dearrachelle@news.com.au. Our supervising producer and audio editor is Reese Gunter. Rachel Fountain is executive producer and audio director. Our executive editor is Sarah Blake. Our senior journalist is Patrick Carline. Video editors are Gillian McNally, Owen Yang and Stephen Woods. Picture editors are Jeff Darmanin and Kristy Miller. Senior camera operators are Daniel Andrews and Oscar Vieira, with sound design by Martin Peralta and Travis Evans. Thanks also to Greg Thompson, Eleni Paneras, Shoba Rayo, Faye Gould, Vanessa Graham, Hayley Goddard, Stephen Grice, Charlotte Karp, Tina Coggins and Harry Hughes. Special thanks to the Daily Telegraph editor Ben English. And Dear Rachelle would not be possible without the help and unwavering support of Kristy and Anne Childs, Mindy Wicks, Damian Loone and Rachelle's friends. This podcast series is hosted and investigated by me, Ashlea Hansen.